Are we live? Guys, here we go. Panache Premier League Season 5 is here. Let's have a round of applause. So, आज से मेनली स्टार्ट अपना पीपीएल अब कॉम्प्लेक्स में पीपीएल को छोड़ के और कोई डिबेट नहीं होनी चाहिए, राइट? So today we are here for the women's auctions, the women category of PPL. So before we start off with PPL, I'd like all the captains, I'd like some words from all the captains. First, I'll introduce the captains. We have four amazing teams here. First team that we have is Blue Warriors, led by Anshu Mishra, fantabulous player, fantabulous captain. So start करने से पहले we like to have two words from the captain herself. How are you going to play this PPL?
Blue Warrior will play 5th season of PPL, and I'm equally excited this time as I was in the first season of PPL. Thank you all the co-captains, and I hope we'll blast this season also. Thank you.
Guys, for your information, Anshu ji has been associated to sports in Panache since the very beginning. Let's have a round of applause for Anshu ji. The next team, the next women's team that we have, oh my god, it's the Firebirds led by Shorbani Ball. Let's have a round of applause for her. And now we're going to ask her, इस बार क्या करना है? इस बार क्या अलग करना है? Reigning champions, right?
इस बार और भी अच्छा खेलना है. I hope my teammates will love playing with me and hope to win this year too.
Definitely. So now proceeding, oh my god, Dragon Queens, let's have a round of applause for the Dragon Queens. Tanisha Chanda is the captain and she's going to lead her team up front and she's going to smack it this year. But let's know how. What are the strategies and what has Krishbia decided for the team this time?
Okay, so this is my second year and I think strategy he prepares, I just execute in the field. Everything is been decided by him. So I'll try to implement some this year. So let's see how it goes, but we'll give our best and we'll play as a team. So that's
Definitely. So now the facts are out in the open. That works. So, and last but not the least, not at all the least, they are one of the best teams out here, Rising Stars. Oh my god, led by Nandita Goyal. Come on, let's have a round of applause for her. And इस बार राहुल भैया ने स्ट्रैटेजी बनाई है, आपने बनाई है, सच बताना और क्या स्ट्रैटेजी अभी हम लोगों को पता होना चाहिए.
Hello everyone, the strategy is always from this side. But obviously, yes, execution is our part and we are going to play well and fight the best. We raise the profit this time.
I mean, that is some confidence out there. So now it's time to start off with the auctions. But before we start off with the auctions, let's be clear with all the technicalities and all the rules that we have for the auctions. I guess all of you already know, but for our spectators to know all the rules, we'll start off with the rules one by one. So for PPL Season 5 Women's Team Auctions, here are the rules. First rule is that there will be a total of 4 teams, each team comprising of 9 players, including the captain. So you will go for 8 further more players along with the captain. After that, the second rule stands. All the captains will receive a list of nominated players in advance, which you have. The base price for each player shall be 3,000 rupees. And as we can see, a 1 lakh pool is allotted to all the captains right here. In the first round, all the players will be available for bidding. Players who remain unsold shall go to the second and the third rounds respectively. People who are not selected or who do not go under the hammer in the first round shall go to the second and furthermore to the third round if that shall happen. On top of that, if any player remains unsold for the third round, a lottery will determine the fate of that player and the team of that player. Next, each captain can participate in a maximum of 2 successful lotteries. So आप एक लॉटरी अगर जीत गए तो उसके बाद आपके पास ऑप्शन नहीं है और एक लॉटरी में घुसने का, बट आप 2 सक्सेसफुल लॉटरीज में पार्टिसिपेट कर सकते हो. उसके बाद द नेक्स्ट इज a 10-second bidding window will be provided to each captain for each player. So there will be a 10-second bidding window and analyzing the demand for that player, I will be regulating the bidding window. So there are no issues. Shorbani, are we cool with this? Once the auction is completed, teams will be finalized and frozen. Player swapping will not be allowed under any circumstance. Both the captains and the representatives can participate in the auction. A strategic break of 10 minutes shall be given after each round. So that is it. It's time to start off. So before we start off, I'd urge all the captains, all the players to play with harmony and not forget that this is a complex and we are all a family. And we believe in the system of families and we shall play with the best spirit, sportsman spirit, everything, you know the rest. And deviations are always appreciated, but still. So can we have the first name for the PPL auctions, the women auctions? Here we have our beloved uncle. He's one of the people. Let's have a round of applause for him first. He's one of the people who's appreciated sports in Panache since he's been here. Vinita Damani. Vinita Damani is the first player to go under the hammer with a base price of 3,000 points. Let's go. Kindly wait for a second. Let's have a name here first. So for Vinita Damani, we are going to start taking the bids. Can we have a bid? From Blue Warriors, we have at base price 3,000. Vinita Damani at 3,000. From Firebirds, we have an incremental 1,000 bid, so we are at 4,000 from the Firebirds. And we have Blue Warriors in at 5,000. 5,000 the Blue Warriors. Blue Warriors at 5,000. At 6,000, we have the Firebirds entering the race again. At 5,000. At 6,000, we have the Blue Warriors again. At 7,000, we have the Dragon Queens entering the race. At 8,000, we have the Rising Stars. The Rising Stars at 8. At 9, we have the Firebirds. At 9. At 10, we have the Blue Warriors. The Blue Warriors at 10. The Blue Warriors at 10 for Vinny. At 11, we have the Rising Stars again. The Rising Stars at 11,000. For 11,000. At 12, we have the Firebirds. She raised it first. So at 12. At 13, we have the Dragon Queens. At 14, we have the Blue Warriors. 14,000 points. 14,000 the Blue Warriors for Vinita Damani. 15,000 for the Rising Stars. 15,000. 15. At 16, we have the Dragon Queens again. At 16,000 points for Vinita Damani. At 16,000 points, we have the Dragon Queens leading the race. At 17, we have the Rising Stars. At 17, the Rising Stars at 17,000 points, the Rising Stars for Vinita Damani. At 18, we have the Blue Warriors. The Blue Warriors at 18,000 points. Can we see a bid for Vinita Damani at 18? At 19, we have the Dragon Queens. The Dragon Queens at 19,000 points. 19,000 points for Vinita Damani. 19,000 points, the Dragon Queens. The Dragon Queens at 19,000 points for Vinita Damani. At 20,000, the Rising Stars. 20,500. Could we recheck the rules? Do we have a 500 bid after 20,000? We have 1,000 bids. So are we okay with a 21,000 bid? Do we have a 21,000 bid? 21,000 bid from the Blue Warriors. The Blue Warriors at 22,000. We have the Dragon Queens. 22,000. The Dragon Queens at 22,000 points. 22,000 points. The Dragon Queens. The Dragon Queens for Vinita Damani at 22,000 points. 22,000 points. I think it's time. 22,000. At 23, we have the Rising Stars. The Rising Stars again at 23. At 23,000 points for Vinita Damani. At 24, we have the Dragon Queens. 24,000 points, Vinita Damani, the first player to go under the hammer today. 24,000 points, the Dragon Queens. 24,001. 24,002, the Dragon Queens. And the player is sold to the Dragon Queens. Dragon Queens at 24,000 points for Vinita Damani. For 24,000 points, Vinita Damani is sold to the Dragon Queens. at a hefty price, 24,000. The first auction player, the first player to go under the hammer at 24,000 points straight. Can we proceed? Can we have the next name here? Aditi Ladha is the next name. Aditi Ladha is the next name. At a base price of 3,000, we have the Blue Warriors at 3,000. The base price at 4, at 5 we have the Firebirds. 5,000 points at first. 6,000 points we have the Rising Stars. At 7 we have the Dragon Queens. At 8, at 9 we have the Rising Stars. At 9,000 points for Aditi Ladha. At 9,000 points the Rising Stars entering the race. At 9,000 points, do we have another bid? For 9,000, can we have a 10? Can we have a 10 here? At 10 we have the Dragon Queens. The Dragon Queens at 10,000 points for Aditi Ladha. At 11,000 points, the Rising Stars. At 11,000 points for Aditi Ladha. At 11,000 we have the Rising Stars. At 12 we have the Dragon Queens again. The Dragon Queens at 12. At 13,000 points we have the Rising Stars. The Rising Stars at 13,000 points for Aditi Ladha. At 14,000 points, the Dragon Queens. At 15 we have the Rising Stars. At 15,000 points, the Rising Stars in it. The Rising Stars leading at 14,000 points for Aditi Ladha. For 14,000 for the Rising Stars. For 14,000 Rising Stars, can we have another bid? So for Aditi Ladha, we have at 14, 1, a 2, and Aditi Ladha is sold to the Rising Stars. Let's have a round of applause. For 14,000 points to the Rising Stars, Aditi Ladha has been sold. Can we have the next name, please? Can we have the next name, please? मोहित भी दादा को यहीं बैठा लीजिए, सीट चेयर लाके उनको यहीं बैठा लीजिए, टाइम लग रहा है बेकार. Can we have the next name? Lisa Changia. Lisa Changia is the next name. We'll wait a second before we start off the bids. So we had a slight delay due to some technical faults. Can we continue now? So for Lisa Changia, at a base price of 3,000 points. At 3,000 points, we have the Blue Warriors entering the race. At 3,000 points, we have the Blue Warriors. At 4,000, we have the Rising Stars for Lisa Changia. At 5,000, we see the Dragon Queens. At 6, we have the Blue Warriors leading again. At 6,000 points, the Blue Warriors. At 6,000 points, the Blue Warriors for Lisa Changia. At 6,000 points for Lisa Changia. For 6,000 points, at 7,000 we have the Dragon Queens. At 7,000 we have the Dragon Queens. At 7,000 we have the Dragon Queens for Lisa Changia. At 7,000 points. At 7,000 points for Dragon Queens. 1 for 7,000, 2. And the player is sold to the Dragon Queens for 7,000. Lisa Changia goes to the Dragon Queens at 7,000 points. Lisa Changia sold to the Dragon Queens for 7,000 points. Can we have the next name, please? The next name that we have is Tanushri Sarkar. For Tanushri Sarkar, can I see bids for Tanushri Sarkar? At 3,000 we have the Firebirds. At 4,000, at 5,000 do we have a bid from Rising Stars? At 5,000 we have the Rising Stars. At 5,000 points the Rising Stars in it. At 6 we have the Blue Warriors. At 7,000 points we have the Dragon Queens. At 8 do we have a bid at 9 Firebirds? For 9,000 we have the Firebirds. At 10,000 we have the Blue Warriors. At 10,000 points we have the Blue Warriors. The Blue Warriors for Tanushri Sarkar. At 11,000 points for Tanushri Sarkar, the Firebirds. The Firebirds at 11,000 points. At 11,000 points, the Firebirds in it. For Tanushri Sarkar at 11,000 points, the Firebirds. At 12 we see the Rising Stars raising their placard. For 12,000 points, the Rising Stars. For 12,000 points, at 13,000 points, we see the Firebirds entering the race again. For 13,000 points, can we see a bid? For Tanushri Sarkar at 14, can we see a 14 bid? For 13,000, we have the Firebirds. The Firebirds at 13,000 points. For 13,000 points, we have the Firebirds for Tanushri Sarkar. For Tanushri Sarkar 1. For Tanushri Sarkar 2. And the player is sold to the Firebirds. Tanushri Sarkar to the Firebirds at 13,000 points. For 13,000 points to the Firebirds, Tanushri Sarkar is sold. Can we have the next player, please? The next player that we have is Harsha Kochar. Harsha Kochar is the next player. Can we see a bid at 3,000? For 3,000 for Harsha Kochar. For Harsha Kochar, can we see a bid for Harsha Kochar at 3,000? The base price is 3,000. Can we see a bid for Harsha Kochar? For Harsha Kochar, can we see a bid at 3,000? For 3,000, Harsha Kochar. For 3,000, can we see a bid? At 3,000, Harsha Kochar. Harsha Kochar at 3,000. For 3,000, no bids yet. No bids yet. Harsha Kochar 1. For Harsha Kochar 2. The player remains unsold for the first round. This name shall go to the second round where we will see bids. You already used it. We have a philanthropist from Panache picking up the next chit. Shona Bardia is the next name. Shona Bardia is the next name. A phenomenal player, a phenomenal sportsman, a sportswoman actually from Panache. Appreciated by all. Can we have a bid? At 3,000 we have the Firebirds. At 3,000 we have the Firebirds. At 4,000 we have the Blue Warriors. At 4,000 we have the Blue Warriors. At 5,000 we have the Firebirds. At 5,000 we have the Firebirds. At 6,000 we have the Blue Warriors in it again. At 6,000 we have, at 7,000 we have the Rising Stars. At 7,000 we have the Rising Stars in it. At 8,000 we have the Blue Warriors. At 9,000 we have the Firebirds. At 9,000 points, the Firebirds leading for Shona Bardia. For 9,000 points. At 10,000 we have the Rising Stars. At 11,000 we have the Blue Warriors. At 12,000, at 13,000 we have the Rising Stars. At 14,000 we have the Blue Warriors. At 15,000 we have the Firebirds. 16 from the Blue Warriors. At 16,000, the Blue Warriors. At 17,000 points, the Firebirds. At 18,000 points for Shona Bardia, the Blue Warriors enter the race again. At 18,000 points, at 19,000 points, the Firebirds. At 20,000 points, the Blue Warriors. Are we expecting a lottery here? At 21,000 points, the Firebirds. At 21,000 points, the Firebirds. At 22,000 points, the Blue Warriors. At 23,000 points, the Firebirds. At 23,000 points for Shona Bardia, the Firebirds. At 24,000 points, the Blue Warriors. At 25,000 points for the Firebirds. At 26,000 points for the Blue Warriors. Just 4K to go for a lottery, our first lottery of the PPL Season 5 auctions. Can we see another bid? 26 is the bid yet. For Blue Warriors at 27, the Firebirds. For Shona Bardia at 27,000 points. 28,000 points, the Blue Warriors. At 29,000 points, the Firebirds. At 30, we have the Blue Warriors. Do we have Firebirds and the Blue Warriors enter the lottery? Do we have a lottery from another team? So the Blue Warriors and the Firebirds will go into lottery for Shona Bardia. Can we have a round of applause for Shona Bardia? So here we go for Shona Bardia. So I'll tell you how the lottery works. The teams entering the lottery, both the chits shall be in hand and one of them shall be picked. The team winning the lottery gets the player. So the team where Shona Bardia will play the PPL Season 5, the Firebirds! Shona Bardia for 30,000 points. So, Shona Bardia has been sold to the Firebirds for a staggering 30,000 lottery amount. And can we have the next player? The next name that we have is Amika Agarwal. Amika Agarwal is the next player. Can we see a bid for 3,000? The Firebirds at 3,000 already. The Firebirds at 4,000 we have the Blue Warriors. The 4,000 bid from Blue Warriors leads the race for Amika Agarwal. At 4,000 we have the Blue Warriors. At 5,000 we have the Firebirds. At 6,000 we have the Blue Warriors. At 7,000 points we see the Dragon Queens entering the race. At 7,000 we have the Dragon Queens. At 8,000 we have the Blue Warriors for Amika Agarwal. At 8,000 points, at 9,000 we have the Dragon Queens. At 10,000 we have the Blue Warriors. For 10,000 points, do we see another bid? Can we see another bid for Amika Agarwal? Can we see an 11,000 bid? For 10,000 points, the Blue Warriors lead the race for Amika Agarwal. At 11,000 points for Amika Agarwal. At 11,000 points. At 11,000 points for Amika Agarwal. And 11,001. 11,002. For 10,000 points, I repeat, for 10,000 points and 11,001. So at 10,001, at 10,002, and the player is sold to the Blue Warriors for 10,000 points. For 10,000 points, Amika Agarwal at 10,000 points to the Blue Warriors. The Blue Warriors at 10,000 have Amika Agarwal. Can we see the next name? Can we have the next name, please? Nana. Nana is the next name. Can we have a bid for Nana at 3,000? For Nana, 3,000 points. Do we see a base bid for Nana? At 3,000 points, we have the Rising Stars for Nana. For Nana at 3,000 points. Nana at 3,000 points. 3,000 points. The Rising Stars have made a bid for 3,000, leading the race for Nana. 3,000. At 3,000, for 3,000, 3,000 the rising stars, 3,000 for the rising stars, leading the race at 3,000, 3,001, 3,002, and the player is sold to the rising stars at the base price of 3,000. Nana sold to the rising stars at the 3,000 point bid. Can we have the next name, please? Can we have the next name here? Kaushani Ghosh. Kaushani Ghosh is the next name. Kaushani Ghosh is the next name. Can we see a bid for Kaushani Ghosh? Can we see a bid for Kaushani Ghosh starting now? We have the 3,000. At 4,000 we have the Firebirds. At 5,000 we have the Rising Stars. At 5,000 the Rising Stars. 5,000 bid for the Rising Stars. At 6,000, at 7,000 we have the Firebirds. At 8,000 points we have the Rising Stars. At 9,000 we have the Firebirds in it again. At 10,000 we have the Blue Warriors. 10,000, at 11,000 we have the Firebirds again for Kaushani Ghosh. At 12,000 we have the Rising Stars. 12,000 points for the Rising Stars. At 13,000 we have the Firebirds. At 14,000 points we have the Blue Warriors. The Blue Warriors at 14,000 points. At 15,000 points we have the Firebirds for Kaushani Ghosh. At 15,000 points, a 15,000 bid from the Firebirds leads the race for Kaushani Ghosh. At 15,000, at 16,000 points we have the Dragon Queens entering the race. At 16,000 points we have the Blue Warriors. At 17,000 points we have the Firebirds in it again. 18,000 points from the Dragon Queens. At 19,000 points the Firebirds. The Firebirds at 19, at 20,000 points the Dragon Queens. A 21,000 bid from the Firebirds. 22,000 points. 22,000 points from the Dragon Queens. At 23,000 points from the Firebirds. The Firebirds at 23,000 points. 23,000 points. 23,000 points. The next bid is 24,000 points. Can we have a 24,000 bid? At 24,000 points we have the Blue Warriors. A 25,000 bid from the Firebirds. 25,000 points, 5,000 more to go for a lottery. 25,000 points for the Firebirds. 25,000 points, the Firebirds. 26,000 points from the Blue Warriors. 27,000 points from the Firebirds. Firebirds at 27,000 points. At 28,000 points, we see the Blue Warriors leading the race again. 28,000 points, 29,000 points, 29,000 points for Kaushani Ghosh, the Firebirds. 29,000 points, 29,000 points, 29,000 points for Kaushani Ghosh. Do we see another bid? So for Kaushani Ghosh at 29,000 points, 29,000 points, here we go, 1, a 2, and the player is sold to the Firebirds for 29,000 points. Can we have the next name, please? Hema Sethia is the next name. Hema Sethia. नहीं उठाइए बोलने के लिए मैं हिसन कर रहा हूँ हेमा सेठिया हेमलता सेठिया हेमा सेठिया लिखो. Hemlata Sethia, apologies. Hemlata Sethia. At 3,000 we have the Blue Warriors. At 3,000 the Blue Warriors. At 3,000 points. At 4,000 points we have the Rising Stars. At 5,000 points we have the Blue Warriors again. At 6,000 points we have the Rising Stars. At 6,000 points we have the Rising Stars. At 7,000 points the Blue Warriors. At 8,000 points we have the Dragon Queens. 8,000 points the Dragon Queens. For Hemlata Sethia at 8,000 points. 8,000 points for Hemlata Sethia. For Hemlata Sethia at 8,000 points. At 9,000 points we have the Rising Stars for Hemlata Sethia. Hemlata Sethia for 9,000 points. 9,000 points the Rising Stars for Hemlata Sethia. 9,000 points for Hemlata Sethia. 9,000 points for Hemlata Sethia. The Rising Stars, here we go, 1 at 9,002, and the player is sold to the Rising Stars at a 9,000 rupee amount, at the 9,000 point amount. Hemlata Sethia sold to the Rising Stars for 9,000 points. Can we have the next name, please? Lavanya Tiga is the next name. Lavanya Tiga is the next name. For a base price of 3,000, we have the Blue Warriors in it. For 3,000, the Blue Warriors. 3,000, the Blue Warriors for Lavanya Tiga. At 4,000, we have the Dragon Queens. 4,000 we have the Dragon Queens. For 4,000 at 5,000 points we have the Blue Warriors for Lavanya Tiga. At a 5,000 amount, at 6,000 we have the Dragon Queens. The Dragon Queens at a 6,000, at a 7,000 point bid we have the Blue Warriors. 7,000 points for Lavanya Tiga. 7,000 points. 7,000 points for Lavanya Tiga. 7,000 points the Blue Warriors. For the Blue Warriors. For the Blue Warriors at 7,000 points. At 8,000 points we have the Dragon Queens. 8,000 points the Dragon Queens. 8,000 points the Dragon Queens entering the race. Leading the race at 8,000. Here we go. 8,001. 8,002. And Lavanya Tiga is sold to the Dragon Queens at 8,000 points. For 8,000 points, Lavanya Tiga has been sold to the Dragon Queens. Can we see the next name, please? The next player to go under the hammer is Gopa Bansal. Gopa Bansal is the next name. Gopa Bansal is the next name. At a base price of 3,000, we see the Firebirds. At 4,000, we have the Blue Warriors. At 5,000 we have the Rising Stars. At 5,000 we have the Rising Stars for Gopa Bansal. At 5,000 points, at 6,000 points we see the Firebirds. The Firebirds at 6,000 points. At 7,000 points we have the Rising Stars. At 8,000 points we see the Blue Warriors entering the race. At 8,000 points, at 8,000 points for Gopa Bansal. At 8,000 points. At 8,000 points, at 8,000 points for Gopa Bansal. At 9,000 points, we have the Rising Stars. For Gopa Bansal at 9,000 points, for 9,000 points. For 9,000 points, can we see another bid at 9? At 10. At 9, we have the Rising Stars leading the race for Gopa Bansal. Gopa Bansal at 9,000 for the Rising Stars. For 9,000, Gopa Bansal. Gopa Bansal 1. Gopa Bansal 2. And the player is sold to the Rising Stars. Gopa Bansal for 9,000 points. Sold to the Rising Stars. Can we have the name of the next player, please? Shreya Wadke is the next name. Shreya Wadke is the next name. Shreya Wadke for a base price of 3,000. Shriya Wadke, my apologies. Shriya Wadke is the next player. Shriya Wadke, at 3,000 we have the Blue Warriors. At 3,000 we have the Blue Warriors. The Blue Warriors at 3,000, at 4,000 we have the Dragon Queens entering the race. At 5,000 points we have the Rising Stars entering the race. At 5,000 points, the Rising Stars. The Rising Stars at a 5,000 point amount. At 6,000 we have the Dragon Queens. The Dragon Queens at a 6,000 point amount. At 6,000 points. At 6,000 points we have the Dragon Queens. At 6,000 points 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 the Dragon Queens. For Dragon Queen Shriya Wadke 1, Shriya Wadke 2, and the player is sold to the Dragon Queens. Shriya Wadke 2 Dragon Queens at 6,000 points. Proceeding, the next name we have is Shikha Jalan. Shikha Jalan is the next player. Shikha Jalan is the next player at a 3,000 base. At a 3,000 base we have the Firebirds. The Firebirds at 3,000. At 4,000 we have the Blue Warriors. Blue Warriors at 4,000. At 4,000 we have the Blue Warriors. 4,000 the Blue Warriors for Shikha Jalan. Shikha Jalan for 4,000 points. 4,000 points, Shikha Jalan, the Blue Warriors leading. 4,000 points. 4,000 points for Shikha Jalan 1. 4,000 2. And the player is sold to the Blue Warriors for 4,000 points. Jasmina is the next player. Jasmina is the next player at a base price. For 3,000 we have the Firebirds. At 4,000 we have the Blue Warriors. For 4,000 points the Blue Warriors. The Blue Warriors at 4,000 points. 4,000 points the Blue Warriors for Jasmina. At 5,000 points we see the Rising Stars. At 5,000 we see the Rising Stars. The Rising Stars at 5,000. At 6 we have the Blue Warriors. At 7 we have the Firebirds. At 7,000 points we have the Firebirds. At 7,000 points we have the Firebirds for Jasmina. 7,000 points for Jasmina, the Firebirds. The Firebirds at 8,000 points we have the Blue Warriors. The Blue Warriors at 8,000. At 8,000 the Blue Warriors. For Jasmina, 8,000, the Blue Warriors leading the race. Leading the race at 8,001. At 9, we have the Firebirds again. At 9,000 for Jasmina. For Jasmina at 9,000 points, we have the Firebirds. At 9,000 points for Jasmina, we have at 10,000 points, we have the Blue Warriors entering the race again. At 10,000 we have the Blue Warriors leading the race for Jasmina at 10,000 points. Can we have an 11,000 bid? Currently we are at a 10,000 bid for Jasmina. So for Jasmina 1, for Jasmina at 10,000 2, and the player is sold to the Blue Warriors. Jasmina at 10,000 points, 2 Blue Warriors. Khushi Ladha is the next name on the charts. Khushi Ladha is the next name. At a 3,000 point bid, can we see a bid at 3,000? We have the Firebirds. Khushi Ladha for 3,000 points at a base price. 3,000 at 4,000 we have the Rising Stars. 4,000 points, the Rising Stars. At 4,000 points, the Rising Stars. 4,000 points, at 5,000 we have the Blue Warriors in it again. At 6,000 points we have the Rising Stars. At 6,000 points we have the Rising Stars. For 6,000 for Aditi Ladda, the rising stars at 6,000 for Khushi Ladda. Khushi Ladda at 6,000 points. At 7,000 points for Khushi. At 8,000 points we have the Dragon Queens. The Dragon Queens have entered the race at 9,000 points the Firebirds. At 10,000 points the Dragon Queens. At 10,000 points the Dragon. At 11,000 points the Blue Warriors enter the race. At 11,000 points the Blue Warriors for Khushi. 11,000 points for Khushi Ladda. At 11,000 points is where we stand. At 12,000 points the Rising Stars. At 13,000 points we have the Firebirds. 13,000 points. For 13,000 points, the 13,000 point bid. At 14,000 we have the Blue Warriors in it again. 14,000 points. 14,000 points the Blue Warriors. At 15,000 points we see the Rising Stars entering again. At 15,000 points. At 15,000 points. At 15,000 points. At 15,000. At 16,000 points the Blue Warriors. At 16,000 points the Blue Warriors. At 16,000 points for Khushi. At 17,000 points the Rising Stars. For 17,000 points the Rising Stars leading the race for Khushi. Khushi at 17,000 points for the Rising Stars. Can we see an 18,000 bid for 17,000? So here we go at a 17,001. At 18,000 we have the Blue Warriors. At 18,000 points for Khushi Ladda. At 18,000 points for Blue Warriors. For Blue Warriors at 18,000 points. At 18,000 points. At 18,000 points for Khushi Ladda. At 18,000 points for Khushi Ladda. For Khushi Ladda at 18,001. 18,002 and the player is sold to the Blue Warriors at 18,000 points. Khushi Ladda goes to the Blue Warriors at 18,000 points. Nidhi Bharadwaj is the next name on our charts. Nidhi Bharadwaj. Can we see a 3,000 base bid for Nidhi Bharadwaj? For Firebirds, we have the first bid coming in at 3,000 points. The base price for Nidhi Bharadwaj at 3,000 points. For 3,000 points. For 3,000 points at 4,000 we have the Blue Warriors. At 4,000 points we have the Blue Warriors coming in. At 4,000 points we have the Blue Warriors coming in. At 4,000 points. At 4,000 points we see the Blue Warriors coming in. At 4,000 points. At 4,000 points for Nidhi. At 5,000 we have the Firebirds in it again. At 5,000 points. At 5,000 points we have the Firebirds for Nidhi Bharadwaj. At 5,000 points. At 5,000 points for Nidhi Bharadwaj. For Nidhi Bharadwaj we go 1, a 2, and the player is at 4. For Nidhi Bharadwaj we have a 6,000 bid from the Blue Warriors. At 6,000 we have for Nidhi Bharadwaj, the Blue Warriors. The Blue Warriors at 6,000 points for Nidhi Bharadwaj. A last minute entry into the bid, but at 6,000 we have the Blue Warriors led by Anshu Mishra. At 6,001, a 6,002, and the player is sold to the Blue Warriors at 6,000. Nidhi Bharadwaj sold to the Blue Warriors at 6,000 points. Anmol is the next player we have. Anmol Madhugaria is the next player. Anmol Madhugaria is the next player. Anmol Madhugaria at a price of 3,000 available at 3,000 points, the base price. We have the Firebirds at 3,000 for Anmol Madhugaria. At 4,000 points, we have the Rising Stars. At 4,000 points, we have the Rising Stars. At 5,000 points, we have the Firebirds. At 5,000 points, we have the Firebirds. At 5,000 points, we have the Firebirds for Nidhi Bharadwaj, for Anmol Madhugadia. At 6,000, we have the Blue Warriors. At 6,000, we have the Blue Warriors. At 7,000, we have the Firebirds in it. At 7,000 points, for Anmol Madhugadia. For Anmol Madhugadia at 7,000. At 8,000, we have the Rising Stars. At 8,000 points for Anmol Madhugadia, we have the Rising Stars. At 8,000 points for Anmol Madhugadia, at 9,000 points, we have the Firebirds. At a 9,000 point price, we have the Firebirds leading. At 10,000 points, we have the Rising Stars. At 10,000 points, we have the Rising Stars. At 10,000 for Anmol Madhugadia. At 10,000 points, we have for Anmol Madhugadia, we have the Rising Stars. For the Rising Stars, at 10,000 for 10,001. At 11,000 points, we have the Firebirds in it. At 11,000 points, at 11,000 points, for 12,000, we have the Rising Stars in it again. For 12,000, we have the Rising Stars. For 12,000 points. 12,000 points for Anmol Madhugadia. Anmol Madhugadia for 12,000 points. For Anmol Madhugadia 1. For Anmol Madhugadia 2. And the player is sold to the Rising Stars at a 12,000 price. For 12,000 points, Anmol Madhugadia has been sold to the Rising Stars. Kanchan Singh. Kanchan Singh is the next name. Kanchan Singh is the next name we have. Kanchan Singh, can we have another bid for Kanchan Singh? For Kanchan Singh, we have the Blue Warriors. The Blue Warriors for Kanchan Singh at 6,000 points. At 7,000 points, we have the Firebirds. At 7,000 points, we have the Firebirds. 7,000 points, the Firebirds. The Firebirds in it for 7,000. 7,000 points, the Firebirds. For 7,000 points, the Firebirds for Kanchan Singh. For Kanchan Singh at 7,000 points. At 7,000 points, for 7,000 points, the Firebirds. For Firebirds 1. For Firebirds 2. At 7,000, the player is sold to the Firebirds. 7,000 points for Kanchan Singh. For Kanchan Singh at 7,000 points, we have the Firebirds getting her. Can we have the next name, please? Sarla Mundra is the next player. Sarla Mundra is the next player to go under the hammer. For Sarla Mundra, we have the Blue Warriors. At 4,000, we have the Firebirds. At 5,000, do we have a bid from Blue Warriors? At 5,000, do we have a bid? Yes, we have a bid for 5,000 for Sarla Mundra. The Blue Warriors at 6,000 points, we have the Firebirds. At 7,000 points, we have the Rising Stars first. Do we have a bid for 8,000? 8,000. Do we have a bid for 8,000? For 9,000, we have the Firebirds. At 10,000 points for Sarla Mundra, we have the Blue Warriors. The Blue Warriors at 10,000 points. For 12,000 points, we have the Blue Warriors leading the race for Sarla Mundra. For Sarla Mundra, 10,000 points. 10,000 points. For 10,000 points, we have for Sarla Mundra. For Sarla Mundra at 10, do we have an 11,000 bid? Can we have an 11,000 bid? For 10,000, we have the Blue Warriors leading. For 10,000, we have the Blue Warriors leading. For Blue Warriors at 10, 1, we have the Rising Stars in it again. At 11,000 points, the Rising Stars at 11,000 points. The Rising Stars at 11,000 points. At 11,000 points, the Rising Stars 11,001. 11,000 points 2, and Sarla Mundra is sold to the Rising Stars. Sarla Mundra sold to the Rising Stars at an 11,000 point price point. Shruti Dhandania. Shruti Dhandania is the next player. Can we have a bid for Shruti Dhandania at a base price of 3,000 points? At 3,000, we have the Firebirds. At 3,000 points, we have the Firebirds. At 3,000 points, we have the Firebirds. For 3,000 for Shruti Dhandania. Shruti Dhandania, we have a 3,000 bid. For 3,000 for Shruti Dhandania, for 3,001, 3,002, and the player is sold to the Firebirds at a 3,000 price point. Shruti Dhandania to the Firebirds at 3,000 points. Sonali Sharma. Sonali Sharma is the next player. Sonali Sharma is the next player. Can we have a bid for Sonali Sharma? Sonali Sharma is the next player. Sonali Sharma at 3,000 base price. Can we have a bid at 3,000 points? At 3,000 points, Sonali Sharma. At 3,000 for Sonali Sharma. At 3,000 for Sonali Sharma. Can we have a bid at 3,000 for Sonali Sharma? At 3,000 we have the Firebirds for Sonali Sharma. At 3,000 points for Sonali Sharma. For Sonali Sharma at 3,000 points. At 3,000 points for Sonali Sharma. Sonali Sharma 1. For Sonali Sharma 2. And for 3,000 she sold the Firebirds. Sonali Sharma to the Firebirds at a 3,000 base price.
Ashish Agarwal. Ashish Agarwal. Oh, sorry, Ritika.
Ritika Agarwal. Ritika Agarwal is the next player. Ritika Agarwal at 3,000 we have the Firebirds in it again. For 3,000 points, we'll be speeding up the process. So I'd like all the captains to pay much more attention now. For 3,000 we have the Firebirds for Ritika Agarwal. For 3,000 for Ritika Agarwal 1. For Ritika Agarwal at 3,002. And we have the Blue Warriors in the race at 4,000 for Ritika Agarwal. For 5,000 we have the Firebirds. For 5,000 points, we have 5,000 points the Firebirds for Ritika Agarwal. So 5,000 for Ritika Agarwal. Ritika Agarwal 1. For Ritika Agarwal 2. And the player is sold to the Firebirds at a 5,000 staggering price point. And for round 1, here we have the last name. We have, sorry, not the last name for the round 1. We have Ranjana Joshi. Ranjana Joshi.
30,000 starting. 10,000 starting.
We'll take the bids in the next 30 seconds. Strategic timeout. We are ready. We'd like everyone to be seated. We'd like everyone to be seated. Kindly don't stand. Be seated. Everyone kindly be seated. So we'll be starting off now for Ranjana Joshi. Only 10,000 from the Firebirds. For Ranjana Joshi, we start off at only 10,000 bid from the Firebirds. At 11,000 points, we have the Blue Warriors. At 11,000 points. At 11,000 points for Ranjana Joshi, the Blue Warriors. The Blue Warriors at 11,000 points. At 11,000 points, the Blue Warriors. At 11,000 points. At 11,000 points for Ranjana Joshi. For Ranjana Joshi, a 1. At 12,000 points, we have the Rising Stars. At 12,000 points, at 13,000 points, we have the Blue Warriors. At 13,000, at a 13,000 price point, at 13,000 points, we have the Blue Warriors. 13,000 the Blue Warriors. For Ranjana Joshi, at 13,000 points, we have the Blue Warriors. The Blue Warriors at 14,000 points, we see the Rising Stars entering the race. At 14,000 points, at 14,000 points, at 14,000 points for Ranjana Joshi. We'd like everyone to be please quiet. At 15,000 points, we have the Blue Warriors. At 15,000 points, we have the Blue Warriors. The Blue Warriors. At 16,000 points, we have the Rising Stars for Ranjana Joshi. At 16,000 points, we have for Ranjana Joshi. At 17,000 points, we have the Blue Warriors. At 17,000 points, we have the Blue Warriors. At 17,000 points, the Blue Warriors in it for Ranjana Joshi. A 17,000 price point for Ranjana Joshi. 17,000 points. 17,000 points for Ranjana Joshi for 17,001. A 17,002, and the player is sold to the Blue Warriors at a 17,000 price. Ranjana Joshi to the Blue Warriors at 17,000 points. The next name that we have is Lata Mehra. Lata Mehra is the next name. Lata Mehra is the next name. Can we expect a bid at 3,000 the base price? 3,000 the base price for Lata Mehra. Lata Mehra at 3,000 points. Lata Mehra at 3,000 points. For Lata Mehra, can we have a bid at 3,000 points? At 3,000 points for Lata Mehra. At 3,000 points, can we have everyone seated in the hall, please? Kindly have a seat. For 3,000 points, for 3,000 points for Lata Mehra, for Lata Mehra 1. For Lata Mehra 2, the player remains unsold for the round 1. She shall go to the round 2. Lata Mehra unsold for the round 1.
They need to guess who is that.
Indira Sethia. Indira Sethia. Indira Sethia. Can we have an only bid this time again? Only 10,000 from the Firebirds for Indira Sethia. For Indira Sethia at 10,000. For 10,000. For 10,000 for Indira Sethia. For Indira Sethia at 10,000. Indira Sethia at 10,000. For Indira Sethia, the Firebirds. For Firebirds, we go 1. We go to, we have the Dragon Queens at 11,000 points. At 11,000 points, we have the Dragon Queens. At 11,000 points, we have the Dragon Queens. The Dragon Queens at 11,000 points for Indira Sethia. Indira Sethia at an 11,000 price point. The Dragon Queens leading the race right now. At 11,000 for Dragon Queens 1. For 11,002. And the player is sold to the Dragon Queens. Indira Sethia at 11,000 points to the Dragon Queens.
So this is the most awaited game.
Rihanna Roy. Rihanna Roy. Do we have a direct lottery here? Only 10,000. Only 10,000 from the Firebirds. 10,000. A direct bid of 10,000 at 11,000 points. We have the Rising Stars. That means the Firebirds are out of this race. At 12,000 points, we have the Dragon Queens for Rihanna Roy. At 12,000 points for Rihanna Roy. For Rihanna, at 13,000 points, do we have a bid from the Blue Warriors? At 13,000 points, we have a bid. At 14, at 15, do we have a bid from the Blue Warriors? Do we have a bid at 15? Do we have a bid at 15? At 14, they have bid. So at 15, we have a bid from the Blue Warriors. At 16,000, we have a bid from the Dragon Queens. 16,000 points. At 17,000 points for the Blue Warriors. At 17,000 points. 17 at 18,000 points, we have the Dragon Queens. I would like the committee to check if all of the teams have the required amount.
Yes.
Okay. So we go ahead at 18,000 points. At 18,000 points, we have the Dragon Queens. At 19,000 points, we have the Blue Warriors. At 20,000 points, we have the Dragon Queens again. 20,000 points for Rihanna Roy. 20,000 points for Rihanna Roy. At 21,000 points, we have the Blue Warriors again. 21. At 22,000 points, we have the Dragon Queens. 21,000 points, we have the Dragon Queens leading for Rihanna Roy. At 22,000 points, we have the Blue Warriors again. At 23,000 points, we have the Dragon Queens. A 23,000 points bid for Rihanna Roy. At 23,000 is where we stand for Rihanna Roy. For Rihanna Roy, here we go. 1. At 24,000 points, we have the Blue Warriors leading the race again. 25,000 points, the Dragon Queens who look really determined. 25,000, a 25,000 leading bid. 25,000 points for the Dragon Queens. 26,000 points, 27,000 points, Dragon Queens. 27,000 points, Dragon Queens. 28,000 points, 28,000 points for the Blue Warriors. 29,000 points, that means we have an entry for a lottery. Do we have a lottery entry? So for Rihanna Roy, they're going to get into a lottery. The Dragon Queens and the Blue Warriors battle it out for the lottery. For the lottery, for Rihanna Roy, we have the two names. At a 30,000 price point, we'd like the player herself to pick her fate. So Rihanna Roy is sold to the Dragon Queen. So Rihanna Roy to the Dragon Queens. Can we have the next name, please? Pooja Anand. Pooja Anand is the next player for a 3,000 price at a base price of 3,000 points. Pooja Anand. Pooja Anand. Can we have everybody seated, please? Gaurav bhaiya बैठ जाइए. At 3,000 for Pooja Anand. For Pooja Anand at 3,000. At 3,000 for Pooja Anand. At 3,000 for Pooja Anand. For 3,000, can we see a bid at 3,000? For 3,000. For 3,000 for Pooja Anand. For Pooja Anand, as I see no bids. For Pooja Anand 1. Pooja Anand 2. The player remains unsold for round 1. She shall go into the round 2. Can we have the next player? Pooja Anand unsold for round 1.
ये लोग ये तो
पहले का सोल्ड है सब.
था ना एक दो तो पहले का
लता मेहरा.
ये मेरा सेट हो गया ना.
मैं सारा चिट जो मेरे को मिल रहा है इधर ही रख रहा हूँ. कोई लेके गया है मेरे हिसाब से. खत्म होनी चाहिए, ब्रेक है ना उसके बाद. सो कैन वी हैव द नेक्स्ट नेम प्लीज? Lakshmi Agarwal is the next name on the cards. Lakshmi Agarwal. Lakshmi Agarwal. Can we have a bid at 3,000 for Lakshmi Agarwal? Lakshmi Agarwal. We have the next name. That is Lakshmi Agarwal. Lakshmi Agarwal. Lakshmi Agarwal 1. Lakshmi Agarwal 2. We have a 3,000 bid from the Dragon Queens for Lakshmi Agarwal. At 3,000 we have the Dragon Queens. For Lakshmi Agarwal at 3,000, for 3,001. At 4,000 we have the Firebirds for Lakshmi Agarwal. At 5,000 points we have the Dragon Queens in it again. Lakshmi Agarwal at a 5,000 price point. 6,000 points we have the Firebirds. 6,000 points, 7,000 points the Dragon Queens. At 10,000 points the Firebirds. They've maxed out at 10,000 points for Lakshmi Agarwal. At 10,000 points for Lakshmi Agarwal. For Lakshmi Agarwal at 10,000 points. 10,000 points Firebirds. For Firebirds 1. Firebirds 2. And the player is sold to the Firebirds. Lakshmi Agarwal at 10,000 points. This means that Firebirds have officially made their team for the PPL Season 5. Let's have a round of applause for the Firebirds. And the best part that they have sold out, they are sold out in their capacity of points as well. So we have no bribe money left on their end. The next name, Sakshi Gupta. Sakshi Gupta is the next player. Sakshi Gupta at 3,000 the Rising Stars for Sakshi Gupta. At 3,000 for Sakshi Gupta the Rising Stars. At 3,000, at 4,000 we have the Dragon Queens. At 4,000 for Sakshi Gupta. At 5,000 we have the Dragon Queens, the Rising Stars. At 6,000 we have the Blue Warriors. At 7 we have the Dragon Queens. At 8 we have the Rising Stars. At 9,000 points we have the Blue Warriors. The Blue Warriors at 9. At 10,000 points we have the Dragon Queens. At 10,000 points we have the Dragon Queens. At 11,000 points the Blue Warriors. At 14,000 points, a jump to 14,000 points for the Rising Stars. 15,000 points the Blue Warriors. 15,000 points for the Blue Warriors. At 16,000 points for the Rising Stars. 16,000 points for the Rising Stars. 16,000 points. 16,000 points for the Rising Stars. 16,001. 16,002. And we have 17,000 from the Blue Warriors. 17,000 points. 17,000 points for Sakshi Gupta. 17,000 points. 18,000 the Rising Stars. The Rising Stars at 18,000 points for Sakshi Gupta. At 18,000 points for Sakshi Gupta. At 18,000 points for Sakshi Gupta. Can we have a bid at 19? So at 18,001, 18,002, the Rising Stars at 18,000. At 18,000, the Rising Stars leading. Rising Stars 1, a 2, and the player is sold to the Rising Stars at 18,000 points. 18,000 points to the Rising Star goes Sakshi Gupta. Priyanka Daga. Priyanka Daga is the next name. Priyanka Daga is the next name. Priyanka Daga. Priyanka Daga is the next name. At 3, at 4 we have the Rising Stars. At 4,000 points we have the Rising. 24,000 points we have the Rising Stars. At 25,000 we have the Blue Warriors. 25,000 points the Blue Warriors. 25,000 points the Blue Warriors. So this means that Priyanka Daga is sold to the Blue Warriors. Priyanka Daga at 25,000 points to the Blue Warriors. So the next player we have is, so I believe that we are up. Akanksha Srivastav is the next name. Akanksha Srivastav is the next name. Akanksha Srivastav for 3,000 points. For 3,000 points, Akanksha Srivastav. We have the Blue Warriors for 3,000 for Akanksha Srivastav. For Akanksha Srivastav at 3,000. For 4,000 we have the Rising Stars. Can we have a bid for 5,000 from the Blue Warriors? For 12,000 a direct bid from the Rising Stars at 12,000 points. 12,000 points from the Rising Stars. 12,000, a 13. The Dragon Queens cannot go for a 13,000 bid. This means that we have at 12,000 points the Rising Stars for Akanksha Srivastav 1. 14,002. And the player is sold to the Rising Stars, Akanksha Srivastav 2, the Rising Stars at 12,000 points. This means that the Rising Stars have made up their team and they'll go into the PPL season 5. Let's have a round of applause for the Rising Stars.
एक मिनट कितना प्लेयर कंप्लीट हुआ देखो एक बार एक स्लिप मिसिंग लग रहा है ना
कौन बचा है बोलिए ना क्या
टीम बचा ना कौन कौन बचा है बोलो स्टार्ट विद हर्षा कोच टीम में किसी होगा
हर्षा कोच
एक इसको लेना है ना
हर्षा कोच
हर्षा कोच
Two, which means that the unsold players will go under the hammer now. The first name that we have is Harsha Kochar. Harsha Kochar, can we see a bid for Harsha Kochar? Harsha Kochar. Harsha Kochar, round 2, 3,000 points. 3,000 points for Harsha Kochar. Harsha Kochar 1. Harsha Kochar 2. We have the Dragon Queens at 3,000 points for Harsha Kochar. Dragon Queens at 3,001. 3,002 for Harsha Kochar. We have the Blue Warriors at 4,000 points. At 4,000 points. At 5,000 points we have the Dragon Queens. So, Blue Warriors are out of the race. That means Harsha Kochar 1, Harsha Kochar 2, Harsha Kochar sold to the to the Dragon Queens. The Dragon Queens, Harsha Kochar. Harsha Kochar. 5. At 5,000 points. Pooja Anand is the next player. 10,000 the Blue Warriors. That means the player Pooja Anand is sold to the Blue Warriors. This means that the Blue Warriors are complete as a team. They are ready for the PPL season 5. Can we have a round of applause for the Blue Warriors? And this also means that Lata Mehra goes to the Dragon Queens. This means that the Dragon Queens are also set for the PPL season 5. We have the complete teams. The auctions are officially over. You can look over here for the teams we have, and we are all set for PPL season 5. Let's have a round of applause, guys. We have the men's auctions we have the men's auctions sharp at 3:30 p.m. We'd like you to be there at 3:30 p.m. and witness the magic.